Hi, everyone. I just want to thank Keith for asking me last minute, literally last night at 8 o'clock to speak today. And I've been referring some speakers to him lately, and he just all of a sudden asked me, like, do you want to speak too? And I was like, yeah, why not? And so today I wanted to talk about just what I've been doing for the last year, which is podcasting, and why I think it's awesome and why I think everyone should do it, or at least find yourselves being interviewed on a podcast show. Whether it's for personal reasons or for professional reasons. So I also want to say that in that moment at the beginning when Michael Caine had told us to have a moment of silence, I want to share that I was actually thinking about my father. I'm a Gold Star daughter, and my dad had served in the 80s and 90s, and about 18 years in, unfortunately, we had lost him. So a lot of the work I do today is in honor of my father and in honor of my mother as well, who was a widow, for 20 plus years after that. And, I'd like to believe she's very happy now because all of her kids have bachelor's degrees and are out of the house and all that good stuff. I also am a veteran spouse. My husband, Scott, is actually here supporting me today. So that's a little bit about my military affiliation and everything. So I know I see some familiar faces, but in case you are learning about me for the first time, I'm actually new to Virginia. I have lived here. We lived here for about 2 years now, originally in Richmond and now Virginia Beach. And prior to that, I have lived in California for about 20 years after we had lost my dad. And prior to really coming out here, I actually had a social media agency for about 6 years. But when we moved, I decided to work with my husband. And for some time, I told myself the story that I was living under his shadow, because if you all know my husband, he's what we call our dog and pony show. He's usually in front of the camera and usually doing the media stuff. And at that time, I just want to thank him for giving me the space to really discover my new identity in the East Coast. It was really last year, summer of 2019, when I was really struggling with loneliness and depression that really drove me into podcasting, actually. At that time, I was convinced that it was hard to make local friends because my husband and I have collectively moved, I think, over 10 plus times in the last handful of years. And so I came to this conclusion that I needed to build some kind of online community that I could take with me wherever I go. And so luckily, by sheer luck, I think, and really on accident, I found an easy way to start podcasting. And about a year later, my shows collectively have over 20,000 downloads. And some people may think, oh, that's so little. Some people might think that's a lot, but I want to kind of tell you the impact of what those 20K downloads have done for me and our family. And when I share the impact, I want you to think about how this could benefit you, whether it can help you personally or professionally. So one of the first ways that podcasting has helped me is the obvious, the number one thing I wanted to build, which is a sense of community. There's a book I've read called The Upward Spiral, and it talks about one way, or one of the best ways to work out of depression is by having a sense of community. And so through my podcasting experience, I've been able to have listeners call in, or not call in, but message me or connect with me or guest on my show, and be able to make new friends in that way. And so today I feel like I can kind of go anywhere in the world. I have friends all over because of podcasting, and even locally as well. And so, the feelings that I had struggled with, obviously they're still there every now and then. I'm still new to the area, but at least I know that in my back pocket, or on the computer, I have a sense of community. It's also helped me. Podcasting is also a great opportunity to network. And so I think that if some of you followed the Synapse Hubcast, you'll get a chance to hear a lot of our incredible Synapse members and them sharing a little bit more about their story and what they're doing. And it's an opportunity to, listen to those stories and what they're doing, and even reach out to them and say, hey, I want to take this a step further, and maybe have a head-to-head with you and talk more about what you do and how we can collaborate. So podcasting is really great for that sense, to build a network, especially with people that you want to possibly see as clientele or serve. It's a great way to deepen or create new relationships. And just so you know, I'm really talking more about like the interview-based type podcast shows. There's a lot of shows that just have like one person, but I personally like to do shows where I get a chance to interview people. And this is to all the introverts out there. If you love, if you, if you're the kind of person that loves to set healthy boundaries in terms of like how long you could talk to someone, like podcasting is a great platform for that, because I always know when the conversation is going to start and when it's going to end. And it's great for, I think it's great for introverts because they feel like they have a little more control and they could do interviewing and relationship building really from the comfort of their home. And so I find the past podcasting conferences I've been to, the majority of the people there have claimed that they're introverts. And there was this big social event that I didn't go through. My husband actually, I think, went to it for like a second. But they had this whole speed dating kind of event where all the, introvert podcasters try to get to know each other. And they had to like talk them through and say, hey, we all know this is overwhelming, but, trust us, we'll get through this. And I heard it turned out to be a great event of all these introverts having to network with one another. Another way that podcasting has impacted me and other people is it really provides validation and healing for you as a person and for whatever you've gone through. I think for me, like when I started podcasting, I shared very often how I struggled with loneliness and depression, and come to find my listeners would reach out and say like, hey, I know exactly how you're feeling. Thank you so much for sharing that. You don't know how much that's helped me. I've had a number of people just email me, like not just like one or two sentences, but just love letters of why the shows have impacted them. So it's really a validating and healing experience for the person doing the show, the guests that are on the show, and even the listeners that maybe aren't ready to be on the show, but are fortunate to listen in. And in that whole experience of, building that bridge with people and building that connection, you start to take it as a form of responsibility to show up as you are. I know that when people do public speaking or put themselves out there, initially you kind of struggle with that imposter syndrome of like, oh, is anyone going to care? Is anyone going to care about what I have to say? Am I versed enough in my field to be able to talk about it? And you'll come to find that if you just focus on service, if you just focus on helping other people, you're a lot more helpful than you realize. And you start to not care so much about being perfect, but focus on, helping others and sharing your expertise and your story in that way, not to be perfect, but because you know that you're helping people. So I talked a lot about how podcasting is kind of a self-healing experience, but I know that we're all business owners here and we all have, we're all trying to market something. So I want to touch a little bit about how podcasting can help your business. So one way is market research. I have a podcast show called Holding Down the Fort, and it's actually dedicated toward military families. My husband and I mainly focus on serving veterans and military spouses and families in our business. And, having a background as a Gold Star daughter, I personally felt like I didn't relate to military spouses. And the reason why we had decided to focus on military spouses is because we know at the end of the day that they're the ones that are handling the house. They're the ones holding down the fort and managing the finances. And so for us, we thought we wanted to build a community of military spouses to know, like, and trust us. But I needed to do that market research because I wasn't a military spouse myself. I met Scott after his service. So the benefit of podcasting is that you can interview your direct target audience and do things such as ask them to share their story or ask them to share their knowledge or any resources that helped them get through their lifestyle. For example, there's a lot of military spouses that are forced to figure out how to build a business because they move around so often that they can't hold down a job locally. And so it's really cool to be able to interview those spouses and hear from them. How did they figure that out? How did they figure out how to make a living while they move around so much and, handle the kids in the house? And also in that experience with the market research, you learn about what resources are already available. And you learn, at least for us, I have learned how our business can better serve our target audience. Like, what angle can we take that no one else is talking about? And how can we serve them in that way? Another way that podcasting can help for your business is marketing. I don't know about you, and maybe a lot of you love to repeat yourselves at every networking event, but I don't. And so the good thing about podcasting is that you could essentially duplicate yourself. You know, you can have a whole episode where you talk about what you do and why you do it. And if anyone ever asks about you or wants to get to know you, you can say, hey, listen to this episode. And if you don't have the time, just speed it up, like just speed up the audio by 2 times speed so it goes a lot faster. Because I know that's the number one complaint people have is like, oh, I can't just sit and listen, but you could speed it up. So just a little tip there for you if you're very restless and you can't just, listen to normal speed. I personally love listening to my podcast shows at 2 times speed because I get to digest information better. But it's an opportunity to duplicate yourself and be able to, market that podcast episode. And, there's so many times where I've had people reach out to me and they would say, so I was listening to your podcast and, and then, in that, like, I don't have to re-explain myself. I could just maybe elaborate on what I was already talking about in that episode. And by then they've reached out to me because they were able to listen ahead of time and kind of establish that know, like, and trust for themselves to be like, okay, this is Jen and I can trust her. And I just want to clarify or reach out or inquire more about her services. Another thing too is that you can even duplicate your team. And so for my husband, he has a podcast show called Wealth and Liberty, and he actually interviews our colleagues. So they have very candid conversations about finances for military families and veterans, and like what they typically think about life insurance, for example. And so you get to listen in on those conversations and hear them as fellow veterans talk about like their take on life insurance or anything other finance related or self-development related, and what maybe they would have done differently if they just transitioned out of the military or as they were preparing to get out of the military. Another marketing tip is that you can use podcasting to repurpose your episodes. Actually before that, one thing you can do is if you already do video, if you already do YouTube or you do Facebook Live, you can convert that video into audio and put that on your podcast episode or podcast show. Also, if you are a podcaster, you could actually convert your audio to video and put that on YouTube. And there's really easy ways to do that. So there's so much you can do with it. I think that podcasting is a great medium for people who love talking, but they don't like writing, because once you have that audio up, you could even transcribe that, send that to an editor, and they can repurpose that into an article for you. So if anyone ever complains that they're awful at writing, but you love talking, then podcasting is a really great way to transcribe, the things that you're just really good at saying, and have an editor take care, polish it up for you. And of course, the last part is, the podcasting community is a very vibrant and supportive community. And there are always people looking to interview. There are always people looking for new stories, new experts, or just anyone. And so there are a lot of communities online where people say, hey, I'm looking for a guest that specializes in this. Is that you? Can I have you on my show? So it's really easy. It's actually really easy to end up on people's podcast shows. The last benefit to your business in podcasting is really the communication skills. You learn to become an active listener. You learn to become a better conversationalist. And I think the thing that's really important is you learn to practice presence. Like you learn to be there and now, with the guest or with the host that's interviewing you. And personally, I think, practicing presence is extremely important today, more so than ever, in my opinion. And podcasting is a great way to practice being present with someone. And of course, I mentioned this earlier for introverts, but it's really good. You learn to communicate healthy boundaries of when to start a conversation and when to end a conversation. I don't know about you, but I've definitely had those coffee meetups where it went longer than I was comfortable to say. And at least in podcasting, you're able to practice that and say, okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up, and hopefully you'll have the confidence to do that a lot better in person as well. And ultimately, I think when you become a better communicator, you become more relatable, more likable, and which is what we all want for our businesses, right? So I have some closing thoughts, and I'm happy to open up to questions if we have time. If you're thinking about getting started, if you've always thought about getting started in podcasting, a lot of reasons why people don't get started is because they feel like they need to be perfect. And what I want to do is encourage you to focus on community over perfection. Like focus on the fact that you are serving your ideal audience, your ideal community. And honestly, your community will forgive you for if you have any audio issues or if the internet skips. I haven't had any of my listeners really reach out yet to say, I'm going to stop listening to you because your audio sucks. Like they'll even say it, but like in a very, they'll even say like, the audio sometimes is hard, but I listen anyway for the community, and that was really impactful to me. And I think that's it. I also just want to close with one quote that I think is important, because I think that some people tend to struggle with not feeling like they're qualified enough to do podcasting or what have you. Everyone has their reasons for not doing it. It's almost like public speaking. So there's this quote that stood out to me in the recent weeks that goes, "The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any," which is by Alice Walker. And so I want you to know that, you matter so much, that your expertise, your story is so needed. And podcasting is a great avenue. It's a great field. It's a great, community for you to share your story, share your expertise. And I promise you'll be surprised at the people that reach out and want to learn more about you and network with you and possibly do business with you. Anyway, that's it. That's all I have to share. And I hope that my presentation was helpful for you this morning.
Jen, that was amazing. Jen,
Thank
really
you.
was. So I'm sure we all have some questions. Raise your hand if you've got a question, and I'll all right, ladies first. Anna, why don't you go first? Unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Anna, you need to unmute yourself. Lower right hand. Okay, there we go.
Quick question, Jen. I was just wondering what tools you use for your podcast. And also, I have two. How do you think it does? I heard you mention converting it from Facebook Live to podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
What are the advantages?
What are the damages? Well, actually, one thing I want to stress is kind of knowing your why first, just as like what Synapse always promotes, like knowing why you want to do podcasting, because the how-tos will actually be really easy. I do have tools that I recommend, and I'm happy to email that to all of you if you're curious to know, like, what tools I use to start a podcast, and how do I use, what tools do I use to convert the audio to video or video to audio. But just off the bat, like off the top of my head, Captivate.fm is a really good resource to host your podcast show that you could do online. And the reason why I like using Captivate is because not only do you get to upload your podcast and it distributes on, let's say, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and what have you, but it also has a built-in website. So for anyone that like doesn't want to get into the hassle of building a website, like it automatically like has that for you, and you just have to customize the colors and stuff like that to make it, associated with your brand. And then in terms of converting, there's a really awesome app called Headliner app. So it's called headliner.app. And that website, it's actually a website that helps you convert your audio, your podcast interviews into video, and even short audio clips that you can promote on social media. Does that answer your question, Anna?
Yes, thanks. Appreciate it.
I think the benefit of turning it into an audio file is that you can then share it on iTunes and Spotify and things like that. If
Okay.
it's just video, you're stuck to YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, stuff like that.
Great. Thanks, Blair.
Yeah. And one thing I want to add is that it's, some people say like, oh, I don't want to put my podcast on YouTube because I didn't record a video, but you could actually have like an image, that Headliner can help you with. And I encourage you, if you have the bandwidth, of course, it's always important to know like the time you have and the resources you have, or if you have a team, that's even more helpful. But, some people are more familiar. A lot of people actually are more familiar with YouTube, for example, and Vimeo and other video type sites than they are with podcasting. Even today, some people still don't know what their podcast app is on their phone. So that's the benefit of, diversifying and being on places like YouTube, because people are already familiar with it.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Thank you.
Blair?
Yeah, I have a question. I did about 20 episodes. Scott was actually one of my first guests back in the day, and I did it in the format of YouTube Live, and then had the YouTube video. But my shows ran really long. Like, what is the ideal length for you? Because some of mine were an hour. I think I had one that was with Tom Leahy that ended up being almost 2 hours. And that's just way too freaking long for anybody. I was struggling to maintain through that. But what is the ideal length in your opinion?
Well, I've been told this. I've been fortunate to get some mentorship on this, but honestly, your shows should be as long as they need to be, as long as you feel comfortable with. I do want to give you a tip though. This is something that we do for Scott's show, Wealth and Liberty, is that he'll have these long conversations with, our colleagues, and then we just break them up into like 15, 30-minute episodes. So that's one way too, if you feel like it's way too long and you feel like people are eventually going to stop. The reason why I don't worry about the length of it is because, people can go back to podcast. They can listen to podcasting like they read a book. When you're done, when you're taking a break from your book, you bookmark it and then you pick up where you left off. Most podcasting apps will, hold your place, in the middle of the episode if you're taking a break from it. So that's why I don't worry too much about the length. I find that our listeners, at least some of my listeners, they just enjoy like listening to us in the background. Like they don't even know what we're talking about. They just enjoy hearing us in the background. And so the length isn't always that important. So that's what, it's different for everyone, but I do think it should be as long as it needs to be. And as long as you're comfortable doing. And then the other tip, like I mentioned, is you could break up the conversation into, shorter episodes and say, this is part 1, this is part 2, this is part 3. So those are my tips if you feel like your episodes are too long. Actually, another thing I want to add to that too, Blair, is that the benefit of splitting up your episodes is that you get more downloads as well.
Well, I obviously uploaded the whole thing, but then I was going to go in and find key parts of the conversation, like 15 to 30-second blurbs that I could turn into short videos for that. But I didn't really think about breaking the actual audio up into chunks, which is what I probably need to do.
Yeah. I have, when I'm editing Scott's show, I just tell him like, hey, can you do this extra recording and say on the next episode, and then we do like a little preview of like what the next the conversation is going to sound like for the next episode. So that's one way I recommend, and it works really well for his show.
Okay.
Eric, you had a question?
Yeah, that kind of ties in what I was going to ask, but I feel as though, especially now that the COVID-19 situation has kicked in, that there's more podcasts than ever before. How do you differentiate and how do you draw people to view it? I mean, there's so much out there. I mean, I don't have time.
Absolutely.
After this current podcast we're on, I've got a busy day and I don't know how people have time to view. How do you promote this? How do you draw people to view it?
Well, it goes back to what I was encouraging in my closing thought is focus on community, focus on the people that like you want them to listen. One thing I really encourage for podcasters, and actually I've come to find a lot of podcasters don't do this, is having a newsletter. If people really want to hear from you, like they're going to subscribe to your newsletter, and that way in that newsletter you can remind them every week that you have a new episode. So I really think it's all about the relationships. Like for example, I could easily say there are a million other networking groups that I could be a part of. I think, as we all know, but the reason why I choose Synapse is because I have a sense of community here. And so when you build a show, you want to start with that in mind. Like, who are you serving? Who do you want to be in front of? And part of building your community too is having guests on your show.
Uh-oh.
She's frozen. Jen, I don't know if you can hear us, but you've frozen up.
Okay. Give me a sec. Let me know when I'm back.
Yeah,
I saw
Okay, am I back?
yell into the other room.
we can hear you, but your video's frozen. So go ahead. I guess you
Or maybe
can.
turn off your video.
Okay, I'm back, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Well, you're back. Now you're gone.
I said the SHIT word. Okay, am I back?
Yes.
Okay, let me just give a quick recap of what I was saying. Let me just get the speaker view in. Look at our internet connection going on this morning. I was just saying that you want to focus on community for your podcast. And one way to do that is to have a newsletter. And it's important. And if you want to like focus on, I like to say that there are plenty of networking organizations out there that I could be a part of, but I chose to be part of Synapse because of that sense of community. And so that's what you want to be able to promote like on your show. And another way to expand your community is by having guests on your show, because if you are able to create a beautiful social media image for them that they can promote, then that's how you're able to draw in new listeners. So those are some of the initial tips that I have for now. But I think the primary, like one thing to keep in mind is like, I'm doing this for my community. And if not, before, I know that people feel like downloads and listenership is really important, but also keep in mind that you want to do this podcast show for yourself as well. You want to do it because you want to become a better speaker. You want to become a better listener, and you want to have your own marketing tools so that, so that when you do go out there, you have something to promote and you at least had that, space to practice speaking and what have you. So hopefully those little tips there help and help answer your question.
Does anyone know if you could place a podcast or a link to a podcast on LinkedIn with just a basic membership of LinkedIn? Because I have the standard free membership.
Yeah, I mean, so you're asking if you can like if you have a podcast episode that you like, if you could share it onto LinkedIn.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's the benefit of podcasting as well, is each episode kind of has its own special URL. And so you can find that sometimes it's on the like the host website. So like, for example, if you go to holdingdownthefortpodcast.com, each episode that I've done has its own unique URL, and you can promote that link onto LinkedIn. And you don't have to have a paid LinkedIn account to do that. And usually if you are listening to the episode, there's always like a share button in there as well. In every podcast platform you're listening from, there's a share link. And so you can just copy that link and share that.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
This is fascinating. I've been on one podcast, and I never felt I did a really good job on that podcast. So I'm going to ask you a question. Are you looking for people to interview?
Oh, always, actually. And, part of the reason why I wanted to be part of this group is because it's, military affiliated. And I do want to share, with at least with Holding Down the Fort, I'm always looking for people who are, military affiliated to share their story, or they're advocates for military families. So I've interviewed a lot of nonprofits and a lot of business coaches and, a lot of people who really push for mental health in the military community. And so, and you don't even have to be an expert. You could just have been a veteran for 20 years and share your story and what that experience has been. I actually am looking for speakers now. So you're welcome to reach out to me, after this interview, and we can coordinate that. And this, this is an example of me building community for my podcast show, because I do want to, connect with military families and veterans. You could also reach out to my husband's here as well. He has a podcast show that focuses specifically on veterans. So if you want to connect with him, shameless plug, he's here as well. But yeah, always looking for people. And I'd like to believe I'm a good enough host where I can encourage people who've never been interviewed to, say things they never thought would come out of their mouth in the most positive way, of course.
Jen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and at such short notice. That was a great talk. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So now you can go back to bed now.
One of the things that we can do is through the chat. Jen, if you would be so kind as to leave your information, your contact information on the chat, and that way we can contact you should we be brave enough or interested in becoming one of your guests.
Sounds good.
So just in honoring time constraints, what I'd like to do now is have us go around and, well, tell you what, Lakeisha, are you still with us? Lakeisha? Hello?
Yes, I'm still.
Do you want to give us a real quick update on Tech for Troops?
Oh, real quick. Okay. Well, we're still here. We're still hanging in and everything. With everything going on, we've been going out to the school districts and donating to the school districts to help the students so they're able to stay online and keep up with their schoolwork. So that was a great thing that we did. We just had an e-waste drive last weekend, and our mission is same every day we walk in the building to help veterans and help Virginia.
So does everyone here know what Tech for Troops does? Just shake your head, yes or no. No? Okay. So Tech for Troops, Lakeisha, you want to give us a quick update on what your mission is? Because I don't think we quite got that before you were going in and out.
Yeah.
Oh,
We have time if she wants to take a little longer.
Say that again, Brian?
We have plenty of time if she wants to take,
Okay.
10 minutes or so. It's up.
Okay.
Well, so our mission is to eradicate veteran homelessness and poverty by bridging the digital divide. So kind of explained it earlier, but of course I was going in and out. So that means we want to do our part to help veterans. There's a lot of veterans out there that are facing homelessness, that have mental health issues and everything like that. What we do, our part, is to bring them in and kind of give them guidance on the digital age that we're in. So we give them a computer class. We go over cybersecurity. We go over, passwords, how to protect it. We go over basic things, how to open up a file on your computer, how to even, get your resume started. So once you leave this class and, they feel like, okay, I can get myself back into the working force and everything like that, because I now have a computer, I have the tools that I need to get my resume together. I know what I need to do to get myself back on my feet and going again.
And just, to clarify, Tech for Troops provides either refurbished or new computers at no charge to veterans who are in need. And so they're doing that, and they're also supplying school systems that are in need with computers when they can. Is that correct?
Yes. So we've gone to a couple of school districts. We've had a couple of school districts contact us and say, hey, we have students who don't have access to internet because they don't have it at home, or the libraries have been closed with everything going on. So we were able to get donations to give to the school districts. And of course, with our veterans, we pretty much refurbish the computers that are donated to us. Once we, have those computers up and running and working, we have them come in for a 3-week class. And at the end of that 3-week class, they test out and they're given that computer free of charge.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, just thinking about being able to apply for a job, it's almost impossible to apply for a job without having a digital presence.
Yes.
So important work that you're doing. Very important work. What kind of things are you currently receiving?